Hello, I'm Trekkee Solo. This is really just a video to fraud deterrent, just in case. Like I don't think that would be going on anyways, but it's one of those things that can't happen with the internet. People posing as other people, or they're fooling and people, investors, are trying to do other things with other people's content. There's a lot of stuff going on, and just solidifying this thing. Like I said, it's not like a teaching video or anything like that. It's just a video to, fraud deterrent, or just me being legit. I'm not trying to coach anything. I went to Westwood Online for video game design. Well, game art slash game design, and I guess I stopped about 8 months early from having my bachelor's, and then just due to changed living situations, I was going to go back, but I haven't had time to go back. But I just kept on grinding, and keep on working, and keep on going at things, and I put myself out there, and just putting art out there, just solidifying, legitifying myself, and not trying to impede or mess around with what anybody else is doing. I guess a lot of people say I went to school for modding, but I didn't go to school for modding. I went to school for pretty much the art side of games. Coding side of games I taught myself, but there's not really too much into it. There's a I do a lot of work on art and the technical sides of the art side of it, and all that rigging, animation, and texturing I learned at school, and modeling, and a whole bunch of art classes, and then game design courses. And like I said, I picked up, I guess, Unreal. That was I had a couple courses before I dropped out, and I didn't. By the time at that time, it was the UDK, and it wasn't really it wasn't like it is today. It's totally different today. It's the same, but it's totally different with they with just basically use the interface. Everything else is pretty much the same. They changed some terminology. They went from actors and interp actors to basically, I guess, dynamic actors to, what is it? Static actors to dynamic to, I guess, intermediate static, station, and movable. And that's, well, I guess that's your type of actors, but and they added the abilities of Blueprint, C++, and well, they went from basically a form of JavaScript, which was they called it Unreal Script, to using C++ and blueprints, and the Unreal Script. I started learning on my own because it our school told us to learn something like Python. And I was like, well, why learn Python when the game engine I'm about to learn, while I'm learning in school, was Unreal Script. So I started learning Java, which was a form of Unreal Script, on my own, and just looking into it and getting further into it. And to learn that, I found I started using Unity because at that time Unity used Boo, Java, and C Sharp. So trying to do a game in Unity, I was double learning like Java to be able to code in Unreal, but it ended up both these both these game engines kept evolving, going further more, and then the blueprint capability. There's a, I mean, you can pretty much code a whole game with blueprints. There's some, there's some there's a few things you can't do with blueprints, but I haven't seen something you can't. Well, game design was from controlling the character to the environment. A lot of that stuff, all of it, I've done so far. I haven't ran into something I can't do in blueprints. There's a Yeah, there's a ton of stuff you can't do like that you can do in Blueprint 7 from the character, but all of it has to line up when you do the blueprints. They all have to line up, and basically they got to follow a hierarchy. Which, if you know coding, everything has like the hierarchy. It goes from you know the from your player script to Unreal has a hierarchy that it follows, and that goes from pretty much the start of if you go to the project settings and go to the game, or no. Your game default game modes, and it runs by game modes. And still, we get caught up in things you might get confused. You have to start a new game mode, start new class of characters, HUD class, controller class, and all these different types can be I guess personalized to whatever type of class or whatever you're trying to do. You just have to figure out how to do it along this type of environment, which is the one thing I don't like about. Well, I mean, it's good, but I just don't like it just because you can't just go in and you got to follow a script, which that's the only thing I don't like about Unreal. But Unreal's great because once you know the format and how everything runs and how the hierarchy goes, it's it's pretty much smooth sailing. And then with blueprints, it's it's an even added advantage because you don't have to code. You just plug in nodes into nodes, and you can quickly concept the game with just with blueprints. But it's still more complex than that. It looks like a whole bunch of stuff, but in reality, it's really just a whole bunch of submenus and submenus and submenus and subcontext and subcontext. It's not really that hard. It's hard, but if you learn all the modeling and everything else and texturing and materials and everything else, you, it's probably one of the best things you can possibly take advantage of with making digital media, multimedia games, or even with VR right now. But like I said, it's not just I'm not here to teach or anything. I'm just showing that I'm able and keep from having fraudulent accounts pop up, people impersonating people or doing stuff on the internet as someone else. Or I mean, because pretty much copy and paste something. I can figure out a fraudulent way to dupe a company and invest in money into me and run it off easily with just the internet alone. I'm pretty sure there's all you need. I mean, come up with a concept document for a game that really only want your the idea, the platform, and everything else, some concept art, and if you can, working functional demo, and you can you can trick and manipulate people. Like I mean, fool people, and it might not ever be. I mean, it could be small time people out there you can fool real easy with, especially with video games. You can try to get them investing into it. That's the reason why I'm making this video, just in case. I don't want to have anybody using my works online as fraud. So that's why I'm pretty much making this video. Not saying that anybody would or anything's that great, but it's a possibility. There's so many different types of people out there these days that you got to watch out. There's in the way the world is, everybody does anything for money. But like I said, I went to Westwood Online, and I stopped about 8 months before I was gonna graduate late, but I still was gonna. I still had a hefty amount of time with Unreal and then messing with Unity, and then the last, I guess I dropped out in 2011, and I was at a C average. I mean, but it's not really when it comes to the grade point average. You're trying to learn something fast paced like game design and art. You're gonna try to learn Maya in like 9 weeks, and then when you continue to learn where you got math and English and game design courses and drawing courses, and you want to learn to animate, and you're gonna do all this stuff within 9 weeks. And then not only do you have like just that Maya class, you got two other classes with that you got to do in 9 weeks. There might be something like statistics, which is highly involved with a lot of stupid math and formulas. Not stupid, like not math is stupid, but it's a lot of formulas, a lot of stuff, and then you're gonna try to get involved with trying to rig and animate, do an animation, and have something textured and animated within 9 weeks, and walking around within a world. I mean, with just Maya back then, ZBrush was, at, I guess ZBrush 4. It just started really getting more more evolved into something that it is today, which is needed. I mean, it was needed back then, but you really need it now. They're really trying to concept something, and you do it if you're gonna try to like keep on level with the field. ZBrush, there's no way you can do it without it. I mean, there's other programs out there, but ZBrush by far to come up with a full working model, and then have it ready to animate, and it's textured, and you have a low poly and a high poly version, which that might disappear in a minute here as soon as Unreal 5 comes out, because they're talking about you know nano triangles, which is basically not like I mean millions of triangles being able to be put into a game without being a problem, without, so you wouldn't have to retopologize anything. You would just have to make it and throw it straight into the game engine. And that's what pretty much what I guess was coming up with Unreal 5 technology, and it's not that far off. But how much work besides that had to go into it, or what type of learning curve, or what other things you have to do with the shaders and materials that I'll, the added work I don't know, but that's definitely coming, and it's really not that far off. So, but going into Unity, another tight game engine. You got CryEngine out there. You got Amazon Lumberyard out there. You got plenty of other game engines out there. Godot or Godot, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different ways to make a video game now, and then it's going to get even more popular. Than what you're talking about. You got way too many different avenues, like platforms that are going to need video games, and it's really going to get big and to the point to where like to sell these to really sell the platforms, there's going to be a need for a need for, I guess, more content, and then not only more content but more exclusive content. That's not You got Stadia, you got Amazon. Amazon has their own game engine with Lumberyard. So you're gonna say, they got some big games coming on that being built on that game engine. You're talking about Microsoft and the Microsoft their uh their streaming network service, and you got Sony, and you got Nintendo, and Nintendo's not gonna drop out. And then there's just way too many. Then you got Steam. There's way too many different platforms to play video games on, and then you don't. That's not even saying computer gaming or games on like Android or I guess your iPhone or your that's not a. There's way too many avenues, way too many platforms. It's opening. It's going to be a big draw and need for video games, exclusive content. Everyone will be looking for exclusive content. They're going to have exclusive content. There's no way they're going to be able to, you're going to compete with something, or you're going to try to sell a service. What's going to be the difference between each service, besides like the quality and whatever perks they have, is the actual media, that the content that it has, and and with VR too coming up, there's the exclusive content's what's really going to drive and sell each of these different platforms, and it makes people want to buy. Back in the day, you want to buy a Nintendo, but you didn't want to buy a Nintendo because Nintendo didn't have Super Nintendo wouldn't have blood or violence on it, but Sega did. Sega had a different version of, like, when it came to Mortal Kombat, that really was the draw, and that was really a fine line when it came to deciding which way direction the games were really going to go, and Mortal Kombat really pushed the definition. It looked better on the Super Nintendo, but it played better on Genesis. So, and then it had you had fatalities and everything else, where you got a dumbed down game version of the game on Super Nintendo. So but people still bought both, or if one bought both one system versus the other system, and then there was a diverse amount of games. I think Electronic Arts did a lot of games for they did for both, but there was some Electronic Arts games you couldn't get for Super Nintendo, but you could get it get it for Genesis. Then you had the PlayStation come out. Then you really had more exclusive content, stuff that wasn't going to be played on Nintendo, like Metal Gear. You didn't have no Metal Gear game on anything else but PlayStation. There was no other platform that had Metal Gear. Konami had it. That was it. There was no other avenue to get that. But like I said, this game, when I'm making a game, this is just showing the ability, and it's not really it's really rapidly conceptualizing a game, just to like just to be doing it. I don't have any, I guess, any investors. And I'm not, let's say I'm not looking for investors. And I'm looking for money. I'm looking for a team to work with. That's another reason why I'm putting this content out there on the internet, because I think it's a, viable business. I think it's a good job, and it's something that's going to bring more people together. In a minute here, you bring artists and art and science. When it comes to music, art, science, it's all together in one. When it comes to video games, and really, I'm looking for a team. I'm not looking for money, so I wouldn't want nobody to like really, you know, portray me in some other way or use my content that I'm making in any other way to try to grab or get money from somebody and they're duped. It's not like I said, I'm not everything I code. I do a lot of looking up. There's so much there's so much out there when it comes to, especially they just released Unity 2020 and point one, and it's not like it's something that I haven't downloaded and put it on here yet or updated yet, but I'm there's so many different things that get added to the game engine that you got to keep on looking up and learning new stuff, and and a lot of the things are coming up that they're making to make the process of making the game faster, and so I'm constantly learning new stuff or learning new programs to try to figure out if there's a way that I can possibly use some part of that program in my workflow to speed something up. There's different programs I might use for just, I don't know, like there's a lot of free software out there that comes out, and then there's paid software. But if you can eat up the free software and there's workflow and try to figure out a way to like speed up your own workflow process and coming up with the art or coming up with meshes or coming up with models and speeding up that process and speeding up the animation process, you should do it. Like I learned Maya and 3ds Max in school, and I can't afford to pay for them. Much as I love the programs, I can't afford to pay for them. They have a light version of Maya and stuff that I like, but I can't afford to pay for it. Like it's $20-$40 a month or 100 and something a year. And it's a lighter version, but you can get Blender for free, and you can render. It has a couple different ways a couple different renders you can use inside of it. And you got the full animation, full texture, full material. Like there's nothing you can't do with Blender, unfortunately, and it's free. Not just not knock with Blender, and if I could donate, I would be donating, but I haven't had no product out there yet to like to sell to put into or made any money to make any donations go back out, which I would do. But so I stopped for about 2012 to about 2016. I stopped really messing with the video games, and I just kept focusing on learning ZBrush, and that was from pretty much from 2012 to 2014. And that was after school and learning Unity and learning how to code really pretty much because I already knew how to do everything else, but like coding and optimizing my game and optimizing my code to where something would function right or function fast or function efficient on. But like now, phones have octa-core processors, and there's so much faster now. They can pretty much run a lot of different video games, just how you put it together, and how you're trying to display it. But I guess from 2014 to 2016, I left to go over the road, drove for a couple of years for my job, and I came back. Like, and I didn't have, had a lot of stuff I needed, and I worked, I guess those 2 years heavily on art. Like doing a lot of painting and digital painting, and not really doing any modeling or any no game work. Just a whole bunch of digital painting work, because digital painting is basically texturing. So I've been doing digital painting and just practicing that to keep my skills up. And I guess 2016 I came back. I didn't have a computer. I used my buddy's Asus laptop, which had like a Pentium 5 or a Pentium i5 or Intel i5 with also with an integrated graphics chip, the 3300 version, I guess, and it really didn't have the graphics processor that I needed. But I tried messing around with Blender, and modeling wise, to get good at modeling, you could do, but trying to render or do something like that, it's not something you can do with integrated graphics chip. You have to have a graphics card that's got power to really today to make anything look impressive with these 3D, with, they be on level with everybody else with 3D. But it's I mean, running and then practicing learning code and learning Blender was what I was doing in 2016 and 2017, and then they keep on upgrading Blender to the point to where, I mean, it's a legit contender. Like, I mean, it's it's the real deal. There's not there's nothing really you can't do with Blender. It's it's fascinating. Like how, I mean, you can put that out there for free and not they get the donations, they got the backing from Epic, they get there's a Ubisoft backed them. I mean, there's a couple different people that paid money, towards that, and it's a great program. It's free to use. If you want to donate, you can donate. You should donate. I will donate if I actually come up with a product to make money. But like I said, it's another beast. It's not the same as which I found out. You get there's little things and little stuff that, like with Blender, that make it kind of hard to use, or not hard to use, but it makes it overwhelming, or it makes it seem like it's overwhelming in the beginning, and it's not really, because you'll do things you'll probably do in other programs you can't do in Blender when it comes to materials and how maps are used. Some of the maps are used in different ways. Some of their nodes are a little bit different than your normal nodes. They're not the same. There's just a lot of different things that come to it that you have to spend time with Blender in order to really get to know it. The only thing I don't like about Blender right now is the sculpting, and and that's only because it's not the same. ZBrush feels more natural. Like then the real difference is when it comes to rendering and how it renders how the triangles look. So you could take like object like a sphere, go into sculpt mode, and you see this. You have to subdivide it in order to get get that smooth topology, but you can also hit this options and go to dynamic topology, and that's what we kind of puts it where it's like sculpt trees, where you're sculpting and you can control how much how much how many polygons are in what area, or you know how dynamic the topology is from from one area to another, and it might not have a consistent like mesh where all it's the I guess the density is the same from one point to the other, but mesh density was like polygon densities like be different. The more detail, the more you can put in that. You can put more detail in some areas, less detail in other areas, depending on how you have the brush set up, or you're like with detail size, and then you put on smoothing, shade smooth, and this is it kind of has artifacts, even though it is shaded smooth. You don't see the squares anymore. But like when you start sculpting into it, you start seeing a little bit of artifacts in it, and that's where you don't see those artifacts. Those kind of artifacts kind of mess me up a little bit when it comes to detail. When you're going into like fine detail, there's the smoothing of the shadows and the normals are a little bit different in other programs, but it's better than a lot of programs. There's not too many other sculpting programs out there that like pretty much Blender would probably have to be a number two, and I've tried a lot of sculpting programs. There's sculpting programs for the iPad that do a pretty good job, but it still ain't as fluid as Well, I guess Sculptrice is probably number two. Blender would probably have to be number three on my list for sculpting, but ZBrush would have to be number one. But you're talking about full modeling animation, you still have the ability to sculpt. There's still a lot of things you can make your base mesh and put a lot of detail into the base mesh, and then go into sculpt mode, and then add the fine details. But to come from like a ball, like of geometry, ZBrush would probably be number one, because just because from ball geometry you don't have to have no base mesh. Mudbox is all right. It's to a point where you might not have a base mesh, but it does also have issues with normals where it might have. Not saying there's anything wrong with it. Also, I forgot about it, but like that's another program that also has. If you have Maya or any other modeling program, you get the good base mesh and bring it in. You can sculpt away, and it'll be just as good as ZBrush. But to conceptualize from like a ball of geometry, there's nothing. There's probably nothing better than ZBrush, because just the fact you can take that ball of geometry, not have a base mesh, retopologize it without at a click of a button, and then have that geometry fit whatever type of model you're making. You can make a duplicate of it and make that topology fit that topology, match the topology, match all your sculpting details, and then bring out subdivision levels, and then bake maps off of it effortlessly. And it's the one reason why you must. ZBrush is probably a must-have. It makes your workflow 20 times faster. But you can still do the same. There's just like these little artifacts right here that I don't. that the smoothing don't get away from. If you're going further, but you got to take the smooth brush, smooth it out. But sometimes I just don't like. I just haven't found a way that I like using it. Like you zoom in, you get more definition in your stroke. You zoom out, it's less definition. So it's based on screen position, how much definition there is in the stroke. Then I can turn that up and down to where I can get more detail out of it. But it's just a hassle. Like the navigation things, I just like the navigation of ZBrush a little bit better. And I'm just used to the navigation of ZBrush. That's what I've been using in the. But you can still get good sculpts and do a lot with Blender. But that's last couple of years. That's what I've been learning pretty much with Blender. It's like a lot of it. You get something to look, you know, to look halfway decent and get some good renders without having to have, a lot of higher rendering programs or, Moto or anything like that or Maya, which the difference pretty much is Maya and Max. It pretty much the difference between Maya, Max, and Blender. What I can say is they do a lot. They do a little bit of different things where Maya and Max just simplify it for you, but and you got to do a couple more steps in Blender to get the same effect. And that's the only real difference in those steps. Might be minimal and minimal extra steps in Blender, but it's still extra steps. I mean, you paying when you buy Maya, you're paying for I guess the newer advances in their programs and technology and their years of experience with it, and also having the ability of you you're taking away, you're simplifying things for you. They're simplifying a lot of things for you. They're doing things for you. There's a lot of stuff they take away some steps you don't have to do. I mean, you take away steps you have to do in Blender, which you don't have to do in Maya and Max. And you're paying for I mean, and then the quality sometimes, like I guess is how it the algorithms and how it tessellates the geometry when you're sculpting, or how it's interpreting normals and how it's rendering the normals and how light interacts. I mean, one light, has if you add a light to something in a render, it kind of sometimes you'll see what they call the Terminator artifact. But but to fix that, you have to do a couple different things. You have to know a couple different things about how the light's being used in Blender and versus how the light's being used in every other program. But just to keep it short, but like yeah, that's just trying to legitimize myself a little bit on this and try to keep from having fraud from occurring, or somebody trying to use my accounts in fraudulent ways. Put a picture and a voice to the art, not trying to really grab attention because I really don't like attention. I just don't want to have issues when it comes down the line later, or somebody. There's just different things you never know. So like I'm guarding myself against that on the internet. But thank you.